Everyone, thank you so much for joining with us this morning. Just like Jason said, my name is John Berkmeyer, and I get to be the Next Gen pastor here at Anthem. And as we get started this morning, I wanted to start off our time together and kind of set up this talk by doing something that we don't often do here at Anthem. If you've been a part of Anthem for many years, you know that one of the things we just have always made a decision from the very beginning to not do is we're just not a church that talks about the news from stage. And we're going to continue to have that heartbeat as a church because here's something that you and I both know, is it doesn't matter what news story is out there, there's a way to politicize it, there's a way to make a political stance. And I just want you to know that as a church and as a pastor, my job is never to make a political position from stage. However, here at Anthem, you know that one of the things that we say all the time is that we are for Gainesville. And the reason why we're for Gainesville is because we believe for too long the local church has been known for who and what they are against. And we as a church want to be known for who and what we're for. And if you pay attention to anything that's been going on in our world over the past couple of weeks, a topic that has come to the forefront, or maybe just has risen even more to the forefront, is the topic of race. And as we get started this morning, I want you to hear from me as a pastor here at Anthem that race and conversations about race are something that we need to be doing as human beings. In fact, it's something that is so important to us as Christ followers to be willing to look inwardly, to be willing to look outwardly and to have open conversations, not only about racism that we see in the world, but also the possibility and acknowledging the possibility that there may just be a little bit, or maybe even a lot of bit, of racism in us. And as we start this morning, my challenge to you is to not shy away, especially as a person who's not a minority, from tough conversations about race. Because here's what I know, is that all people have been made in the image of God. That's you and that's me. And that's our neighbors who are people of color. And I want our church to be known as a safe place for all people. And that more and more people would see that Jesus died for all people. So my challenge for you is very simple. To pause this week, to be willing to not just add more noise to the conversation externally, but maybe, just maybe, to add some intentionality to the conversation that needs to happen inside of each one of us. And here's really why this matters as we get started into the talk that I'd like to share with you today. And it's this very simple idea, and it's in fact an idea that you've probably heard me talk about before, and it's this: each generation is responsible for the generation coming up behind them. Each generation, no matter what age you are, no matter what generation you're a part of, I believe and we believe here at Anthem that we are all responsible for the generations, for people that are younger than us, that are coming up behind us. And there's a lot of discussion around generations, right? I'll be honest with you, I'm a millennial, and there's a lot of shade that gets thrown at millennials. And then us millennials and the younger generation below us kind of returned fire, and now you've probably heard the term okay boomer. We've kind of turned the fire towards you guys. And so there's all this discussion around generations. And so before we even get started really this morning, I just want to make sure that we're all clear on who generations are, and if depending upon how old you are, when you were born, what generation that you're in. Another thing is they put up these different generations on the slide behind us that I want to let you know is that today we're going to have a little bit of fun, and I actually have my laptop up here with the Facebook live feed pulled up. So I'm going to be interacting with you, those of you that are watching and commenting on Facebook and on YouTube in the comments. So what I'd like for you to do before I get started into this is I would love for you in the comments, find your birth date on here, and I would love for you to share with me in the comments what generation are you a part of. And in just a minute, I want to take a peek at that and interact with you a little bit. But as we get started today, I just want to make sure that we are clear on kind of what generation we come from, because this is so important in letting us know and setting us up to know what generation is behind us. What generation is it we're supposed to be for? So here we go. We'll look at a couple of these really quick. We've got the lost generation, and you can see the dates there. We've got these couple generation here, the greatest generation, the silent generation from 1925 to 1945. Then we've got the boomer generation from 1946 to 1964. Maybe that's you if you're watching today. We've got all of our awesome Gen Xers that are watching on the live stream and in the room, 1965 to 1979. Then we've got our Zennials, as they call them, from 1975 to 1985. Those cantankerous millennials from 1980 to 1994. We've got what they're calling the iGen or Gen Z from 95 to 2012. And then we've got Gen Alpha from 2013 to 2025. So in the comments, let me know what generation are you a part of. And as you do that, I want to really zero in on this idea is that my talk today, while I will talk a lot about kids and a lot about parenting. In fact, if you're a parent here at Anthem, you may have heard me give a talk similar to this before, but I want everyone to hang in there with me, because here's the thing that I don't want you to miss. Whether you're a parent or not, whether you have kids or not, you know a kid. If you're an adult or if you're a college student, you know a kid. You may not have kids of your own, but you definitely know a kid. And you definitely have an opportunity to make an impact in the life of a kid. And here's why this really matters. And you've heard me use this quote before if you've watched some of my talks before. And it comes from a really smart guy named Joshua Shipp. He had this to say. He said, every kid is one caring adult away from a success story. Every single kid. It's why we've built our family ministry experience for kids' birth all the way through high school and for college students the way that we have. We don't want kids to just sit in rows and listen to a talking head. We want kids to be able to be known by another caring adult outside of mom and dad, because we believe that every kid is one caring adult away from a success story. And I believe that this is true for every single generation, that every generation has the opportunity to be that caring adult for the kids behind them. So I want to look in the comments really quick. We've got them pulled up here. Let's see what generation everybody is from here. We've got Jen Dempsey, we've got Zennial, Lauren Samuel, Millennial, Sammy Pickens, Millennial, okay. All right, let's see if do we got any boomers? There we go, Steve Flanagan, boomer in the room, love it. A lot of Gen Xers, Rick Barton, Joy Hampson, Gen X, Lindsay Lockhart, Gen X. Awesome. Yep, Emily Morales just got done singing Millennial. I love it. I love seeing everybody and all of the generations that you represent. And here's why this is so important, is because whatever generation you fall into, whatever generation you represent, you have the opportunity to be a caring adult, to be the type of adult that helps the generation behind you be better and have it better than you have now, to set them up to win. In fact, I'm so thankful for the older generations, people that are older than me, the greatest generation, the boomer generation, for doing everything that they've done to help me have the type of life that I have today. And here's the thing, is that we are stewards of the generation behind us, but we're also a steward of something else. We, whether we realize it or not, are also stewards of time. And if there's anything that you know as someone who's getting a little bit older, is that time is fleeting. Time is moving by faster than maybe we would even like to realize, right? It seems like the older I get, and I'm almost 30, which is not that old depending upon who's listening, but the older I get, the faster I feel like the years are running by. The older I get, the quicker I feel like things are just moving around. The older that I feel like I get, the faster the weeks go by. And if you're a parent, you have probably heard me talk about the idea of leveraging time and how important it is. And if you've been in some of our parenting talks over the years, you have probably seen my marble jar. And when parents see the marble jar come out, you know that we're about to talk about something that makes us a little bit comfortable, and that's time. In fact, it's a limited number, a limited amount of time. It's 975, we'll put it on the screen, 972 weeks, roughly. So there's about 972 marbles sitting inside of this marble jar. And each of these marbles represents 1 week in the life of a kid. From the moment that a kid is born to the moment that hopefully, right, parents, fingers crossed, they graduate and move on to whatever's next, whether that be they move out of the house to go to college or they move on into the workforce or get married, whatever that is. There's roughly 972 to 1,000 weeks between the moment that a kid is born and they move on to what's next. And whether you realize it or not, and for those of my friends that are watching right now that have kids that are seniors, you know that this is true, and this is never more real than in this moment right now. That from the moment your child is born to the moment that they walk out the door, your kid is packing their bags for what's next. Whether you realize it or not, from the moment your child is born, they are packing a bag. And for some of you, this is really real right now. This is super real for you. Why? Because your kid is probably getting ready to pack their bag here very shortly. And when you look at this jar of marbles, you probably don't have all these marbles sitting in there. You probably just have maybe 10, 11, or 12 left. And you're realizing how quickly time goes by. You're realizing how quickly time moves. And the reason why I give this marble jar to parents is because I don't want them to miss the opportunity to see these weeks and to take each of these individual weeks and remember that they matter. And if you're not a parent in the room or you're a grandparent or you just know a kid, this principle is the same for you because all of us are responsible for the generation that's coming up behind us, and time is moving really, really quickly. Here's the idea that I really want to zero in on today, and it's this. When you see how much time you have left, you tend to get more serious about the time that you have now. When you see how much time you have left, you tend to get more serious about it. This is so true. If you ever played sports, you know that when the fourth quarter rolls around in football or the last inning, everything changes, right? Everybody from the bench is making a bunch of noise. The fans are making a bunch of noise because there's a very small amount of time left for things to go the way that you want them to go, for us to win. And this isn't just something that's like a good idea. It's actually something that is crucial and pivotal to helping us be great parents and great humans and great older generations. It's actually a biblical idea as well. Moses in Psalm 90:12 had this to say. He was talking to the nation of Israel and he says, "Teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom." What Moses is saying is teach us to remember that each week matters, that each week is important. And when we do that, when we remember that time is fleeting, that time moves by so quickly, that we'll gain a heart of wisdom. Now, do you know what a heart of wisdom is? Do you know what that is? Well, me neither. But it's definitely the opposite of stupid. It's definitely the opposite of foolish. And so what Moses would have us do, and what I have tried to help parents and adults and small group leaders and teachers and administrators, everyone who knows a kid, to see, is that when we put a time limit, we basically put a countdown clock on the life of a kid, it helps us make what matters matter more. Because when you see how much time you have left, you tend to make what matter more. Right? When you see how much time you have left and we realize that kids are packing their bags and we realize how quickly time goes by, that time is ticking. And whether you've got a kid who's really, really young or you've got a kid who's a junior or senior in high school, there's some marbles that are left. But throughout all of the time that you have been a parent, your kids have been packing their bag. And there's certain things that matter to us, right? There's certain things that matter to us that we want them to put in their bag. And there's probably a lot of things that you want your kid to learn, but one of them definitely would be that we want kids to have a good view of the world, that they can see the world in a way that maybe you want them to just see that the world is their oyster. Or maybe you just want them to see that the world is a place that's worth adventuring and worth seeing. Maybe you want your kid to have a similar worldview to you and to see people as having value. That would be something that you want them to pack in their bags. Another thing that might be important to you, especially if you're a person of faith, is to have a proper understanding of what this book is all about and to be able to see the firsthand accounts of people that spent time with Jesus in a way that's helpful and understandable and applicable to their life. If you're a parent or you know a kid or you're a grandparent, you want kids to have a heart for people, but also to have a heart for their Heavenly Father, to have a relationship with them. If you're a person of faith, this is so important to us. And as a church, this is so important to us that kids fall in love with Jesus and follow him. And there's some other things that we want kids to have, right? Some slightly smaller things I got to get out of here. We want our kids to have healthy relationships, don't we? We want the kids that we know, the kids that are in our school, that are our neighbors, we want them to have a healthy relationship with people. We want them to see people that maybe don't look like us through the proper lens, to be for one another. And by the time that our kid or your kid or a kid that you know packs their bag and moves on to what's next, you want them to know that people really matter. We just got done singing a song all about the fact that God is a light in the darkness, and that's so true. We want kids to be able to know that, yes, there are going to be days that are dark, there's going to be moments in life that are dark, but that he is a light. And we want kids and students and young adults and everyone to know that they have the opportunity to be a light as well. And so whether we realize it or not, the moment that our child is born, that your child is born, that a kid is born into the world, they're packing their bags for what's next. And last but not least, we want kids to be successful, don't we? We want kids to achieve their version of success, but hopefully along the way, we want them to be kids and young adults and hopefully future adults and parents that are people of great character. And all of this stuff doesn't happen in a moment. All of this stuff is not just an instantaneous thing. You can't just flip the light switch on character. You can't just flip the light switch on healthy relationships, and you most definitely can't flip the light switch on having a healthy relationship with their Heavenly Father. And to prove this point, I just want to make sure that you see this from me. As someone who leads family ministry here at Anthem through our amazing staff and volunteers, I just want to give parents the opportunity to take a deep breath and maybe realize something that's a little bit hard for us to realize, which is this, that we can't make a kid love God. You can't force a kid into a relationship with Jesus. It just doesn't work that way. And I know that for so many parents, sometimes they carry this like huge weight of feeling like they have to have it all figured out, that they have to have it all together to help their kid see God the way that they see them. And I've had conversations with parents of young kids and kids in middle school and high school, and they're just so nervous about this idea. They're so nervous about whether or not their kid is going to fall in love with Jesus, and I get it. Someday, if Ashley and I are lucky enough to be able to have kids, we 100% want our kid to love and follow Jesus too. But here's the thing that I don't want you to miss. It's that you can't force a kid to love God. All that we can do is model it. You've probably heard me say this before. It's an amazing quote from one of our friends here at Anthem. He's not here at Anthem, but he's a part of helping Anthem be successful. His name is Reggie Joyner. He said this. He said, the best way for someone to know God is to know someone who knows God. The best way for your kid to know Jesus is to be around other adults who know him too, who model what it looks like to love God and love other people. They are watching you. And you know this, right? Because kids are sponges. They soak up all the goofy things we say and our mannerisms and all the funny stuff that even we do with our body. It's so funny. My mom realized at one point that I kind of walk like my dad. We've got like a similar walk, and that just kind of happens. Like my dad and I aren't even the same size, but I watched my dad walk so much that apparently I started walking like him. I waddle a little bit more. But the point stays the same, that we can't make a kid fall in love with God, but we can model it. And we can make intentional decisions to help them be around other people, other adults who are modeling it as well. We also can't make a kid be a kid of character. We can't force a kid to be a great kid. We can't force a kid to be successful. And if we can all agree that time is moving faster than we'd like, it's so important that we make sure that we're modeling the right things at the right time. Whether you're a parent or not, or a grandparent, or you're a small group leader here at Anthem, or you're a teacher, it's so important that we remember that we need to do what only we can do and trust God with the rest. There are just some things that we aren't going to be able to do. There's just some things that we're not going to be able to make a kid do, but there are some things that we can do. There are some things that we can do, and we need to do them well, and I'll talk about them in a minute. But when it comes to helping a kid pack their bag for what's next, we need to do, as parents, as adults, as teachers, as college students who get to rub shoulders with generations younger than us, we need to do what only we can do and trust God with the rest. And I made this point that time is moving faster than any of us would probably like to know or appreciate. And that each one of these individual marbles indicates and shows us an individual week. But there's something amazing that happens with time. This funny little word time, this little teeny tiny word, there's something amazing that happens when we leverage each individual week, 1 week at a time. It's called compounding interest. And the best way that I can explain it is this idea: time over time. And if you've ever heard my marble talk that I give to parents, you've heard me say that investing time over time is the best way to have a lasting impact in the life of a kid. Because what happens in just 1 week will not change the course of a kid's life for forever. Some of you had a parent that tried their best, but they just didn't show up time over time. They showed up maybe once a month or once a year, and it was difficult for them to really have a lasting impact in your life. It's because the collective weight, the collective momentum that comes from investing time over time over time over time is the type of things that makes experts in our world. People that are at the top of their game, the best athletes, the smartest scientists, the best engineers, they're at the top of their game because they've understood this principle, the principle of small investments of time over time. That's really what makes things last and really what makes things matter. And they make them matter more. Because here's the truth, right? When we see how much time you have left, we tend to value what happens over time. And this is so true for so many of us who are close to kids and we're watching them grow up faster than any of us would like. I'm the oldest of 4, and I've watched my youngest brother, Jeremy. I was like 11 years old when he was born. He's now a freshman in college. He's driving. He's got like a beard and all this stuff. And I can't even begin to wrap my mind around how quickly he has grown up. But as he got into high school, I began to realize that like some of the things in that season, in that little bit of season of Jeremy being in high school, that they needed to matter more than some of the things that I was doing. I needed to show up at his football games. I needed to be there when he was in a play. Because when we see how much time we have left, we tend to value what happens over time. And what are some things that happen over time? What are some other things that we can place over time that matter in the life of a kid? How about very simply love over time? Love over time. Modeling love for a kid time over time has the horsepower to set a kid up for life. I have the opportunity to talk to a lot of middle school and high school students. I also have the opportunity through some video coaching to talk to tons of student pastors all over the country. And here's the thing that I know about middle school and high school students, is that they're constantly asking the question, do I matter? Am I loved? Does anybody love me? Do I have a purpose in this world? And I promise you that as an adult, as a small group leader, as a parent or grandparent, that showing a kid that you love them time over time, that you invest love over time in them, that just won't be a question in their life. There will probably be weeks when they struggle, but there's something about the collective momentum of modeling and showing a kid that you love them time over time that sets a kid up for a lifetime of not only knowing what it looks like to be loved, but also to show love in return. And isn't it interesting that God has shown us love over time as well? Theologically speaking, I think it's so interesting that frankly, in the garden, when we believe that sin began, when Adam and Eve sinned for the very first time and sin entered into the conversation, it entered into the world, God could have fixed that problem in less than 24 hours. God could have just sent Jesus into the scenario, he could have died for everybody, and we would have been set. But instead, I believe that God chose to leverage this principle of time over time. That God chose to leverage love over time in a way that helps us look back over thousands and thousands of years. To look at how God leveraged love over time to people that constantly turned their back on him. People just like me and you, people that ran away from him. And time over time, God chose to model love to them, to people groups over thousands of years, until the moment that he decided to send Jesus into the picture. To show us in one moment what he had been modeled for all of time. What he had modeled for us over time, that he loved us and that he was for us. so that all this time later we could look back on one singular moment and not just know that in one moment that he loved us, but that for thousands of years he pursued men and women just like us. There's something powerful about love over time. How about fun over time? Do you think fun over time matters? I think it does. In fact, when I look at all of creation, I'm constantly blown away at how much animals love to just have fun. You can't really look in the yard and not see two squirrels goofing around with each other or birds messing around. I mean, how many dolphin and fish and whale and animal videos have you seen of them goofing around together? There's something about fun that's just interwoven in us. And if you're an adult, I think sometimes we just don't have enough fun. If you're a parent, I just want to encourage you to have more fun with your kids. There's something about fun that lets kids know that they're loved, that lets them know that they're forgiven. It's kind of hard to have fun with someone that you haven't forgiven. And so to let your kid know that they're forgiven, sometimes the best thing we can do is just have a little bit of fun. How about words over time? The average kid will hear 6 to 7 negative words for every one positive word they will hear, which is mind-boggling. Could you imagine how much words over time could impact the way that a kid sees themselves, could impact the way that a kid sees themselves in light of eternity, and the way that they see success, and the way that they see character, and the way that they treat other people? Could you imagine how words over time could change the way that they see people, the way that they have relationships? Could you imagine what it would look like if we leverage stories over time? Parents, adults, small group leaders, teachers. Sometimes I think we're so afraid of just being vulnerable and honest with the kids, the young people around us, the generations behind us. We miss the opportunity to leverage stories over time. We miss the opportunity at the right time in a phase-appropriate, age-appropriate way to maybe share a story about a moment where you didn't exactly love other people well, or that maybe you didn't make the type of decision that would get you a character medal, that maybe you missed out on the opportunity to see the world the way that you wanted to see it, that maybe you could share a story where you definitely weren't a light in a dark world. You see, there's something really powerful about sharing stories over time. How about the story of how you came to know your Heavenly Father? When was the last time you told a kid in a phase-appropriate way a story that sets them up, that lets them know that you love them and gives them a little window into you just as a human being? You see, investments of time over time is how we leave a timeless legacy. And sometimes I think that we get this idea of legacy wrong. Sometimes I think that we think that a legacy is something that we leave behind for someone, like an inheritance or a house. Sometimes I think that we think that a legacy is really just about being known and about being famous. I'm kind of into antiques and old Florida stuff. I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to history. And I'm on this Facebook page, and it's all this old Florida stuff. And there's a guy recently who showed a bunch of old black and white photos that he had just found at this antique shop. And in the post, he just kind of laid out that, like, he asked the antique dealer, where did all of these pictures come from? Where did you get all of these? And the guy said, oh, when someone dies, people just bring all these pictures up and drop them off and get a few bucks. When it comes down to our legacy, our photos, our story may just be boiled down to one sentence scribbled on a bulletin, to one sentence scribbled on a piece of rock where we're buried. And it could just be that our life and our legacy is boiled down to a bunch of old black and white photos left at an antique shop. Unless we realize that a legacy isn't about something we leave behind for someone, but that rather the idea of having a timeless legacy is about what we leave in someone. Don't miss this. When we leverage and invest time over time in the next generation, in people that we care about and people that we love, we are leaving behind a timeless legacy. And I know that you know that this is true because someone did it for you. In fact, right now, I want to ask you this question. Who was someone, or what is one way that someone older than you invested time over time in you that impacted you for the rest of your life? In fact, in the comments right now, I want you to, in like 3 or 4 sentences, I want you to say, hey, this is a person who invested in me deeply when I was younger, and because of their investment, I am who I am today. You're actually going to help me. We're going to pick a couple of those stories, and I'm going to read them from stage in just a moment. But you're actually going to help me set up the end of my talk today. Because whether you realize it or not, there was someone, at least one person, maybe it wasn't even a parent, maybe it was a coach or a grandparent or a neighbor, someone who said, you know what? That little kid, they're worth it. They're worth my time over time. And if we're really honest, that the reason why we are who we are today, it's because of people just like that. A generation ahead of us that invested deeply in our lives. They understood that a legacy is not about what they left behind for you, but rather what they left in you. And as I'm talking right now, you can probably think of that person's name. And you could probably think about the ways that they showed up time over time in your life. And just modeled for you what it looks like to say, hey kid, you're worth my time, you're worth me showing up. Maybe on Mother's Day you could say, yep, my mom invested time over time in me. She invested love and fun and words and stories over time in my life. And because of that, because she leveraged the collective weeks that are represented in this jar, when it was time for me to pack my bags and move on to the adult that I am today, I was better for it. You see, there's people all around us, generations much older than us, that have left us something, hopefully for better or for worse, they've left us something, but in many cases in us, they've left us something that's better. And I just want to hear from you 3 or 4 sentences, and as I wrap up, I'm going to read some of those stories from stage in just a minute. But as we wrap up, I want to challenge you to do the same thing that someone did for you. I want to challenge you to show up and be present for the people that are around you now. Because whether we realize it or not, the people that are around us now are the only people that we have to leave something in. And I know that this might be a scarier idea for some of us, because I might be talking right now to some of you who are parents of really young kids, and you're looking at this marble jar and you're saying, you know what, my marble jar is pretty full. I've got some time. But for others of you, your kid is 17, 18 years old and your marble jar is about to run out. For others of you, you're older and your kids are married and they have kids of their own with marble jars. The relationship doesn't end, don't miss this. Your relationship with your kid doesn't end, or our relationships with kids don't end the moment they turned 18 and walk out of our house, but it does change. And their bags are packed and they're moving on to the next thing. And so my challenge is that as kids around us are packing their bags, that we show up and invest time over time, love over time, words over time, stories over time. And when you do that, you're making history. The type of history that helps young people like me and like those of you watching and those of you even older, you know that when someone made history in and with you, it's like this anchor that brings you back to all the things you packed in your bag when you were a kid. It's so important for us that we show up and be present for the people around us. It's so important that we don't miss it, that we don't miss the opportunity to do that. And like I said earlier, each generation is responsible for the generation coming up behind them. It's so true, and you've seen this. You've seen how the generations older than you, just someone even a few years older than you, modeled something that you picked up along the way. In fact, I'd say it this way, that each generation is responsible for the blank of the generation coming up behind them. Each generation is responsible for the blank of the generation coming up behind them. And this makes us a little bit more uncomfortable, doesn't it? Because there's a lot of things that we could put in this blank. There's a lot of things that we could say, well, you and I are responsible for, but we are. Each and every one of us has the opportunity to be the caring adult in some kid's success story. You see, I believe that each generation is responsible for the marriages of the generation coming up behind them. I believe that each and every generation is responsible for the faith of the generations coming up behind them. believe that each and every generation is responsible for the injustices, injustice, and racism, and everything else that could be summed up into justice for the generation coming up behind them. You see, we have the opportunity to invest love over time in the generations behind us. And when we do, the collective energy of that has the power to change someone's life. And you know that this is true because you've seen it in you. In fact, I have all these amazing stories right here, 3 of them that I would just like to share really quickly as we wrap up today. Stories from people like Steve Flanagan. He would say this, that my kids have invested so much in me. They believed in me and loved me unconditionally. Steve says, love you, kids. Steve recognized that a younger generation had the power to invest in them as well, absolutely. Melissa DeStefano says this, my grandfather taught me patience. Let me dance with him by standing on his feet, even though I have no rhythm. He taught me so much in those moments. Susan Matheson said this, my parents have always been supportive of me, and I'm so grateful. Thanks, Jillian. Michelle Bauer had this to say, my mom has always been an inspiration, and I love her so much. As a single mom, she always chose to spend time with us, have fun with us, and teach us to be all that we could be. Thanks, Mom. Don't miss this. Don't miss the opportunity to recognize that you are who you are today because someone decided to see you as worth it, decided to invest time over time in you. As we wrap up today, I want to end with this idea. I referenced it a little bit earlier, that we will only be remembered by the people who know us now. The younger generations around you, the older generations around you, you will only be remembered by the people who are sitting around you, the people that you're in contact with. And it's so important that we don't miss the opportunity to be for them. Because time is running out. And I do this every time I give this talk, but if you're a parent and you've got a kid who's maybe in 6th grade, things start to get a little messy. They'll only be in 6th grade for so long, and you can't wait for them to move on to the next thing, but nonetheless, they'll only be in 6th grade for so long. For so many of you, you've only got a few weeks left because your kid's a senior and they're about to walk out the door. Or maybe you have grandkids or your kids are married and your marble jar just looks different. We will only be remembered by the people who know us now, and it's just a phase, don't miss it. They will only be in 6th grade once. Your grandkids will only be the age that they are for now. It's just a phase, don't miss it. Your small group will only be in your small group on Up Street for so long, don't miss it. You're only going to have that class of 4th graders for so long. Don't miss it. Because whether we realize it or not, time is moving faster than any of us want to realize. So as we wrap up today, I want to give you 2 challenges. The first one is this. Start today to choose to invest the time you have left in the people that are around you now. This is so important. If you're a parent, if you're an adult that knows a kid, a college student that knows a kid, now is the time to invest the time that you have left in the people that are around you now. If you're one of my friends watching who's 50, 60 and over, there is plenty of time left for you to make a difference in the generations behind you. As annoying as they may be, you only have a certain amount of time to invest in the next generation so that you can leave it better than you found it. The second one's a little bit harder. I want to challenge you to take the time that you have left to say thank you to those who've invested in you along the way. For me, that person, his name's Grampy, and he was my grandfather. He dedicated me when I was a baby and stayed with me each step of the way. And he's gone now. But about a year before he passed away, I had the amazing opportunity to just sit across from him and to say thanks for investing time over time in a kid that wasn't even connected to him biologically. He was an adopted grandparent. He chose to be the person who leveraged time over time to make me the man that I am today. And for some of you watching right now, the person that you would say best set you up in life, you didn't get a chance to maybe say thank you the way that you wanted to. And I want you to take the time this week just to write them a letter, even though they can't read it right now. There's something about saying thank you to the generations that invested deeply in us. And for those of you that could say that person for me is still here, do not miss the opportunity this week to just say thanks. To say thank you for investing time over time in me. I am who I am today because of you. It's just a phase. Don't miss it. Don't miss the opportunity to say thank you to the people who invested most in you. I promise you it's worth it. As I wrap up, I just want to share this last idea. It's your chance to leave a legacy. Don't miss it. When you look at the marble jar for your kid, or you look at the marble jar for the person down the road, or just a kid or someone younger than you who might be 45 and still younger than you, or 50 and still younger than you, there is still time to leave something in them. A legacy is what we leave behind in someone, not for someone. So that maybe, just maybe, someday when you're gone, your life is summed up by something way bigger because of what you left in someone than just one sentence scribbled on a bulletin or one sentence scribbled on a stone. I want each of us to have the opportunity to leave a timeless legacy behind. It's just a phase. Don't miss it. In just 1 minute, I'm going to wrap up and pray for us, but I want to quickly tell you about a resource that we have for you here at Anthem. If you're a parent, I want to give you this book for free. Now, if you've been to some of our parenting events before, you know I hand these out all the time. So if you already have one, I'm so glad that you have it. But I believe this book here, it's called Don't Miss It. It unpacks in way deeper fashion what I've talked about today. But this book, I believe, it's not very big, has the power to dramatically change the way that you parent and to dramatically change the way you interact with kids and students in your life. We want to give it to you for free over the next week. You can go to anthemchurch.com/don't miss it. Fill out a quick form there. Let us know how we can ship it to you. But we want to give you this book for free. Anthem Church is here and exists to be for you and to be for the next generation. In fact, we believe that the leading edge of what we do is to be for the next generation in our community. And one of the ways we love to do that is by sending you that book this week. Guys, thank you so much for joining with us. I'm going to pray for us as we wrap up, and then you're free to go. Move on with your day and celebrate Mother's Day. Jesus, we come before you. I come before you so grateful for all of the amazing people that have invested so deeply in my life. And I'm so thankful for all the people that are watching right now that have had people just like us invest in them time over time. God, you love us more than we can ever understand. And with that love, you gave us people. People who have been stewards of time and invested time over time in us. God, help us to be those types of people for the next generation. Help us to be those types of people and to not miss it because it's just a phase. To not miss the opportunity that we have to invest in the generations behind us and in our kids and in the kids in our community. Jesus, help us to leverage this week, right here, right now, to thank the people who have invested time over time in us. Because time moves so quickly, and we don't want to miss it. Jesus, it's in your name we pray. Amen. Guys, thank you so much for being with us today. We will see you next week. Have a happy Mother's Day.